So what's great about living in a country that promotes democracy and free speech is that we're all able to share opinions, discuss politics, and fight for what we think is right. Now, all that is well and good, but how often are we actually able to use that to motivate people to change their opinions? So let's take a look at some hard data. All right, right here we got a convenient pie chart explaining the outcome of having political arguments with people on Facebook. So if you'll notice all the green on this chart, that's when you decide to change your mind. All the blue is when they decide to change theirs. And all this red is when nobody changes their minds and everyone just ended up getting mad at each other. So I'm sure we've all witnessed this kind of situation online on Facebook, especially in the light of the recent political things that have been happening. And it's really just crazy how much our opinions can differ from one another. So most of us have probably had our own thoughts on politics, morality, and whether the earth is round or flat or made of pudding, whatever. And honestly, when you're sure of something, it's really hard to wrap your head around how someone else can be so sure of the opposite. I want to talk to you about why we have so much trouble changing people's minds and take a look at how skepticism can be both good and bad. Now, since we're human, we're all endowed with this funny thing called confirmation bias. And what this means is that we tend to deliberately seek out information that confirms what we already think, while ignoring information that challenges our beliefs. So rather than looking, confirmation bias. So rather than looking at both sides of the story, weighing the information, and picking a side based on those facts, we pretty much just pick a side before looking at any of the facts, and then cherry pick the information we like in order to validate the choice we already made. In a paper called Motivated Skepticism in the Evaluation of Political Beliefs, Charles Tabor and Milton Lodge describe an experiment done on students from an introductory political science course to see the effects of confirmation bias. Students from different sides, they were all from different sides of the political spectrum in the class, and they were given an equal number of pros and cons about two controversial topics, one being gun control, one being affirmative action, which, if you don't know, is favoring groups of people who have experienced disadvantages in life due to discrimination. So the students came in with their own opinions, and by the end of the experiment, they left expressing an even higher level of support for the opinions that they began with. They were asked to think objectively about each topic and rate the strength of each argument from an objective standpoint. Even then, they spent all their time falsifying the merit of arguments that they already disagreed with and easily accepted without issue the arguments that were already in their favor. This is confirmation bias at work. Even when we try to keep an open mind about differing opinions, we're pretty much bound to act in defense of what we already believe to be true. It's important to be aware of this because sometimes we fall into our opinions, we fall deep into our opinions because they sounded nice when we decided that we believed in them, and all the evidence in the world stacked up against you might not keep you from thinking otherwise. This is where skepticism is useful. Skepticism can be healthy. For instance, if you're taking the time to step out of your own collective opinion to see how it holds up, you look at the necessary sides of the argument, you play devil's advocate with yourself and your own ideas, and allowing yourself to be convinced only when the appropriate amount of information comes your way. That's when skepticism is good. You'll recall earlier I mentioned there's some people in the world that believe that the earth is flat. This is what I like to call misguided skepticism. It comes from just a fundamental misunderstanding of the intent of the scientific community. So skepticism is good when it opens the floor for debate of opinions and ideas, and it's bad when it denies objective truths about the world we live in and refuses to look at the evidence. It becomes a toxic thing. So a disclaimer. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust your gut on your stance on certain issues, but you should definitely acknowledge your confirmation bias, and in doing so determine when and why being skeptical is important. So let's take a look at some of the tools that you can use to create an informed opinion about just about anything. You're going to want to arm yourself with the understanding of the safeguards of the info provided by the scientific community. The scientific research, goes through these trials to make sure that the information is valid, so you shouldn't worry too much about them. You should understand your own confirmation bias and how to elude it. Step outside, look at all the sides objectively, allowing yourself to be skeptical about what you already believe. It gives you the opportunity to gather more information. And finally, figure out the right sources. You're going to look at biased versus unbiased information. What you want is unbiased information because it's going to be pandering towards you if it's already biased. But if you can't find unbiased information about what you're looking up, look at the bias from both sides. Try to weigh it out evenly. So finally, all things considered, it can be really difficult to set aside your own preconceived opinions because we're basically programmed to keep our ideas safe from conflicting information. But maybe if we all take the time to be a bit more aware of our own confirmation biases, we might be more willing to be open to the opinions of others. Thank you.